Welcome to Lead Live, a conversation for ministry leaders by ministry leaders. I'm Josh Franks.
And I'm Clint Berry, and we're the co-founders of the Lead program. Today on Lead Live, Josh and I are wrapping up our church multiplication series, talking about vision. Josh, welcome in to the last edition of Season 2, Lead Live on point today. Good to see you, my man. Welcome in.
It is good to see you as well. So happy to be wrapping up this season. It's been good as we've been navigating through things that we have hoped are helpful to ministry leaders all throughout the world. So glad to be here.
Absolutely. And today we're going to talk church multiplication training, which is a series of teaching that we have just collected from leaders across the country, church planters, strategists, district officials, really helping us get into the nitty-gritty of becoming a church leaders who are just throwing down multiplication as a part of our DNA. So I'm really excited to release that training coming up here in a couple of weeks. I know we've been positioning this, get ready, but it's almost done. And today we're going to talk about vision. And so I'm really excited that you and I get to have a conversation about church multiplication and vision. So why don't you go ahead and set it up? Why is vision so important to the life of any organization? Why do we have to have it? And what's the point of having a vision for where we're going?
Yeah, it's a great question. So vision is essentially the target that you're shooting for. Without knowing what the bullseye is, you don't necessarily know if you're getting there or if you're moving in the right direction. A lot of the pieces that we've talked about in church multiplication training are super important and inform your vision. And so when we think about vision, obviously from the word, it's not some cute catchphrase that you can easily post. It's a clear picture of God's desired future. So if you think of a personal vision, it's who does God want me to be in the next 3 to 5 years? If it's a corporate vision or a ministry vision, it's what does our ministry look like, or what is our ministry accomplished or accomplishing, or what are the qualities that we're growing in the next 3, 5, or 10 years. And so vision is a clear picture of the future that God desires. So a real definition for vision is what is the expression of God's heart to the people in the area that he has called you to reach. That's specific to a ministry environment. You could change that in a business world to what is a clear picture of the future as it's expressed in your target market or something like that. But when it comes to being ministry leaders, it is what's the clear expression of God's heart to the people in the area that he has called you to reach. That's
good. Yeah, that's good. And so when we talk about clarity, I think you had said it's not a quick catchphrase, and from the Bible, right? Proverbs 29:18 is basically saying when there's no vision, people perish. So this is a big deal, like to know where you're going in the trajectory. And so I'm certain that, the writer of that proverb was thinking probably both physically people die, but I think without a vision, your organization is going to slowly wane and lose its momentum. So without a vision, our organizations are going to perish specifically. But what is it about it being more than a slogan?
With that. Let me follow up with that when you think of that Proverbs passage. So if you think of your team, the vision helps point all the members of your team in the same direction. Vision it's always directional. And so if you have multiple members of your team, we've used this illustration a lot. If you have a team of 6 powerful horses and you put them together, but they're all pointed in different directions, eventually they're just going to rip each other apart. They're not pulling in the same way. You're definitely not going to get any traction. You're not going to move. You're only going to cause damage to your team and to the environment that your team is operating in. Right. The same is true without a unified and clear vision. You can't point everybody that God has called and will call to be a part of your team and your ministry or your church to move in the same direction. But if you tie those horses together and they're all pulling in the same direction, you get velocity, speed, power, all of the things that you need in order to get to that destination.
That's good.
And so you read Acts chapter 16. I think it's real clear that the supernatural vision, even that God was giving to Paul in his missionary journeys through the Holy Spirit, there was a clear Macedonian call. Mm-hmm. God sent someone in a vision to call him to a specific place, a specific people, to express God's heart to those people in that place. They tried to go into pockets of Asia, knowing that this thing, it's supposed to advance, but not here. And so when it comes to ministry and the church, vision is directional and vision is also supernaturally guided.
That's good. That's good. So for a team that's thinking directional and supernaturally guided, for them to discern what God is doing in their place and what he's calling them into, just let's give our audience and some of our leaders just a quick discernment. Okay, if you and I were going to discern God's call for us to plant a church somewhere, what would we do first, second, and third in a general sense? What would you instruct us to do?
Yeah, so as we've been talking about church multiplication training, and we've had just amazing guests, these folks, I'm so excited to release this series of trainings to everyone out there. These men and women are just amazing, spirit-filled, used by God. It's humbling to see the diverse group of amazing leaders that God has brought around this church multiplication training in order to be able to serve the folks that we serve and are going to be able to use that church multiplication training. But I think some real practical ways to discern is you've got to go back to the beginning. And while vision is going to be unique, because God's heart is going to be uniquely expressed among different people. So if God's called you to, rural West Virginia, it's going to look different than inner city Chicago.
Yep.
And so to trust that while there's similarities in what the church is meant to do, which is to express God's heart, it's going to be envisioned or expressed differently because of those different groups of people that it's going to be expressed among. So I think that's something to think back through, to start at the beginning, which is really, what is God's heart? And we would say that God's heart is for every man, woman, and child in a given area to have an opportunity to hear and respond to the gospel of Jesus Christ. So that doesn't change. That's not going to change whether you're in rural West Virginia or whether you're in urban Chicago or anywhere else. That's what God wants. Now, the types of men, women, and children, the cultures of those men, women, and children, the values, the things they celebrate, and the things that they're afraid of, that's going to shape how the good news is heard and received by those people. And so you've got to start with God's heart and then move in. The discernment process has to involve getting to know your cultural context. And so spending time with the people that God has called you to reach, getting to know the things that I've just said, their hopes and their dreams, their fears and their concerns, their the way they schedule their life, the values that they have, all of those things. If you go back and watch the cultural context section in church multiplication training, it'll give you great next steps in order to understand the uniqueness of the people that God has called you to reach with the gospel.
That's good. Yeah, outstanding. And so then we were also thinking about, in terms of vision casting and trying to get that it's more than a slogan, it's more than a tag that you can put on something, but to say, okay, what's the way in which we're going to do something? So for our leaders to go back into church multiplication training and look at the internal culture or the values that you would have to set for you and your organization, for your team to kind of rally to, this is the way we're going to do this. Then that with your external culture, your context in which you're in, and your internal culture, the team that you're going to form and the pieces and parts, now you're going to start to shape, all right, how are we going to express in words that we can all rally to, right, as a guidepost back, is our vision statement. So, you and I have crafted vision statements for our local churches as well as for the LEAD program. But, you had a sweet little outline of, why don't you share what that outline is, and let's work through each one of the parts, and then maybe we can share some anecdotal stories to go along with each one. So run us through how you would begin to say, okay, in terms of crafting a vision, it has to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go ahead and share those with us.
Yeah. So the pieces of vision that I think make it helpful, and like you said, we've talked about how a catchphrase it's not a good enough vision because it's not a clear enough picture. So I'll give an example. And if your church has this as their vision, I'm sorry, but it's going to be a bad one. So if your vision is to love God and to love people, that's a bad vision. That's really how it's more of a cultural piece, an internal cultural piece. It's universal to all churches that we're supposed to love God first and love our neighbor as ourselves. But if it's not specific, it doesn't provide a clear picture of how do you know that you've reached that mile marker? How do you know you've reached that destination? How do you know you've accomplished, or you begin to look like what God is asking you to look like among the specific people? So love God and love people is fine, but it's not good enough. It's not a clear and specific vision. And so that's the first part of kind of thinking through the vision. And I would encourage you that your vision is probably going to be more than a sentence, and it's probably going to be more than a paragraph.
That's good.
It's going to be a multi-bulleted kind of expression, and it depends on the time frames that you're looking at. So the more specific you can get with your vision, the better, so that it keeps you focused and keeps you all moving in the same direction.
It's good. So how have you created a specific vision, or maybe how have you struggled with creating a specific vision in church ministry over the years, Josh? So what's come natural to the specificity, and what's been about it?
Yeah. So I think the most difficult time I've had with kind of discerning the vision, and this is after praying and fasting. We just celebrated 4 years at our current church ministry, and before that we were involved in church planting. And the places where we were planting churches, it was very easy to determine who God had called us to. And so it was the town of Centerburg, or the county or Knox County, or it was the city of Newark. And where we're at now and where the church building is located is not in the center of any city or county. It's on the corner of multiple places, and they don't necessarily, they kind of interact with one another, but they definitely have their distinctions. And because I just couldn't get my head wrapped around who God had called us to reach. And since vision is a unique expression of God's heart to the people in the area that he's called you to reach, we just couldn't land on vision. We could we had some nice sayings, but they weren't specific. And it wasn't specific to the people in the area that God has called us to. So we have spent a long time trying to figure out who is it that we're supposed to serve? Who is it that we're supposed to share the gospel with? Who is it that we're saying is within our area of responsibility? And now that we have clarity on that, the accompanying piece of vision has become much clearer. And so having the specifics of that target audience, of the group of people that God's called you to, will help bring clarity to, and specificity to your vision.
That's good. Yeah, I think there is some hard part even sometimes with the lead program, in that, well, who do you want to raise up as a leader? That's what we know. That's what we get asked quite a bit. We're like, everyone who needs to get raised up as a leader, and so there's some specificity to that. And so as we've talked about it in lots of different ways, like, well, there are English speaking leaders, there are French speaking leaders, there are American Sign Language using leaders, there are Spanish speaking leaders. And so that's who we're catering to, and in terms of language. But is it, men and women? Is it volunteer or vocation? And so some of our head nod is like, well, it's all of that, right? Yeah, it's all of that. But being able to clearly identify age range, serving families or leaders that are emerging or whatever, brings clarity in the direction to what your organization is trying to do, and basically the barrier that you're trying to overcome as an organization, right? Or to reduce lostness, or whatever your articulated value is. So vision must be specific. I love that.
Yeah, and another reason why it must be specific is, you and I were very opportunistic in that we see opportunities everywhere. That's, in fact, one of the values of the LEAD program, is that we want to embrace and just inhale the opportunity in every possible situation. But when it comes to leadership, not every opportunity is going to help you fulfill God's vision for your ministry. And so if you don't have specific targets, it's easy to take a detour. It's easy to take an exit ramp because the lights are shiny and you're tired, and it seems like an easy place to get off. But it's not going to get you to the destination that God intends you to get to. So being as specific as possible, right? If your vision is love God and love people, everything is a possibility. I once created a vision that was not specific, and I had a mentor tell me, you could drive a Mack truck through that vision. Like, basically anything's gonna go. It's not gonna bring precision, or it's not gonna limit anything. Basically every opportunity becomes a possibility. And if your vision isn't specific enough to limit those opportunities, then it's not specific enough.
That's good. I like that a lot. All right, take us into number 2 then. Vision specific, and then a vision is
measurable. So your vision must be measurable. And we have a whole unit in church multiplication training about measurements and why being able to measure progress is so important. And so when we're talking about things that are measurable, the question is, are you able to determine whether you or God have or have not accomplished that part of your vision? So vision should be multifaceted. It shouldn't be singular, because there's different areas, there's different values that you want your ministry to grow in. You want people to grow in as disciples. And so it's going to be a multifaceted vision. People don't grow at the same rate across all areas of their life at the same time. Your outreach as a church may not grow at the same rate as your kind of connect with one another, or word strategies or things like that. Just depending on the people that God brings around, those things are going to grow at different levels. And so measurements is about, have you reached that mile marker in that specific area? And so some things that you could measure are time-based measurements. So time-based can be two things. They're deadlines. We want to have accomplished X by this date. That's really easy to measure because you get to that date and you go, have we done that? So, so maybe it's, we want to have 5 discipleship micro groups by July of 2021. We'll get to July of 2021 and you go, do we have 5 disciple? Like, yes, no. So that's time based. You could also say we want to have been doing something for a certain amount of time. So time-based isn't then about the deadline. It's about how long you've been doing something. And so it could be that you want to invest the next 3 years in a tutoring program in your local elementary school. And so it's very easy to measure because the question is, have we done this over the last 3 years? So super time-based is very easy to measure. The second way that you can measure is a quantitative measurement. This has to do with how many. And so whether it's a fundraising campaign, whether it's how many people or what percentage of people you want maybe giving to missions or involved in life groups or serving on your ministry teams or in leadership development or in a discipleship relationship, whatever, maybe it's a percentage, maybe it's a number, whatever the case may be, that's a quantitative goal.
That's good.
And then finally, the qualitative goals are the hardest to measure. Qualitative goals have to do with your values, and your values at a personal discipleship level and your values at a corporate level. So for instance, if one of your values at a personal discipleship level is growing in intimacy with God, how do you measure that? Right. You're not going to measure it well based on how many books of the Bible they've read in the last month or how long they spend in prayer or what spiritual disciplines. All of those are some signs and markers, but your qualitative measurements are going to be more anecdotal, and you may find them more on a sliding scale where they're self-evaluative and may feel a little more subjective, but you still have to measure them. So maybe the question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how connected do you feel to God right now? Or how connected have you felt to God in the last month? Right. So that's a qualitative measurement that will help you understand where people are at in those specific types of vision destinations.
As you're sharing that, I think that sometimes the qualitative actually has to be measured like in 3 or 4 other questions. So it's like, how are you doing in your intimacy with God? And then you would have subcategories that you could rate on a 1 to 10 or a 1 to 5 scale. And just kind of like culturally within your organizations or your church saying, well, this is what we're kind of setting as standards for how that would be achieved. Right. So those do get very much involved. As you've been talking, Josh, I think one of the church that you were able to plant in Centerburg, and I had the privilege of pastoring as well. We had a vision for one particular compartment of the ministry. So like we had basically a globalized vision, but then as a part of that, doing a service project. And so the vision was to establish a partnership with the community through serving the community. And so that was going to run and we already knew, hopefully that would be established within 2 years. So then we had some little markers that went along with established. So we kind of saw it as phases. It would go more leaning in towards the qualitative. But so what are the markers of established that we hit those? Yep. Okay. We're into a new phase. So then what's that new phase looking like? Okay. Well, to grow our ministry partnerships, and then how many do we want to have, that sort of thing. So we kind of saw it in phases, but that would be more of another example of a compartment of ministry,
Sure.
that you can then kind of say, okay, this is where we're going in this particular compartment, but here's the statement so that we can be specific and so that we can be measurable within that specific compartment.
Yeah, and another example of that is in the LEAD program, one of our values is that we want to put our students first. And so we try to make systems and structures, all of our interactions demonstrate that we value them. And we believe that the best way that we can demonstrate that value of students first is through the quality of our cohort directors. So our cohort directors aren't professors. They're not doing the teaching of the content. They're the coaches. They're ministry veterans. They are investing their experience into our students. And so, we have our students evaluate their cohort directors, and cohort directors evaluate their students. And part of that is helping us figure out, we desire great cohort directors that serve students first, because we think that's the best way to train in the way that we think is the best way to train ministry leaders. And so we're constantly evaluating and measuring, how is that going? How are we doing? What can we do to make that even better?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So take us into the third piece of vision and how to make it really tight. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the third piece is inspirational. And so if your vision is from God and it's the expression of his heart to the people that he's called you to reach, it's probably going to be bigger than you feel like you're able to accomplish. You may be able to break it down into real tangible, tactical next steps. But when you look at the future, say you look 5 years from now, or you 10 years from now, the picture that is, what if God gets what he wants in your community? What if God gets what he wants in your cultural context? Hopefully he is giving you an inspirational picture that feels bigger than what you're able to accomplish or what your team's able to accomplish. And so that drives you, in my opinion, to prayer. Yeah. I've come up with visions that are just based on my own thoughts. And when you bring them to the Lord, he's like, that's not what I want. That's not big enough. You become limited by your ability. Or you end up just thinking about how great you are, right? And what I can accomplish, what can't I accomplish, kind of thing. But an inspirational vision is really birthed in your time alone with the Lord, your time together as a team with the Lord. It should come from him, not come from your own thoughts of what he wants.
That's good. Yeah. How would we've heard leaders say that, you clearly hear a vision from God. It should make your heart beat fast. It should make you go, oh, like, I want to do that. I want to give my life to that. And a little bit of intrepidation, like, well, that's bigger than me. I can't make that happen. And so it does take some crafting. It takes some time. I remember, it took me 3 years to articulate it for the church plan. It just kept getting refined until finally I could say it, I could know it. And it really was compelling to me to try to capture. Sometimes it's hard to put into words something that God is birthed in your heart. And so hopefully all of you as leaders, as you're watching this, can clearly articulate your own personal vision and make it go, man, this is going to be so exciting when God gets what he wants, or for your organization to clearly know. But don't be surprised. What do you think about this, Josh? I would say don't be surprised if it takes you a little bit to really craft in what you want to say about what God is saying. Right. But you and I have also had moments where it just went bloop, there it is. And we both went, oh, okay, that's what it is. Right. So there's some cool moments. Take me into the fourth step of what you see for vision.
So the first part, or the fourth part, is relevant. Is your vision relevant? And really, we've talked about it a little bit already, but this just goes back to, does the vision make sense for the people that God has called you to?
Yeah.
So if part of your vision is to build a community center in order to help the poor, but God's put you in a upper middle class suburb, and you go, what? Why is this not working?
Yep.
Well, that's because the vision isn't relevant to the needs of your community. So, for instance, First Alliance, we're in Columbus, the church that I pastor, and really we've got a heart to reach our community now that we have clarity on who it is and maybe how we can go about it. We're kind of open to any type of possibility, and we still don't totally know how it's going to look in the specifics. And so we're kind of like, let's try anything. And so a group of Columbus area churches, I mean, it's a really cool thing, kind of banded together to connect with Columbus City Schools in order to provide learning extension centers. A lot of churches all around the country have been doing stuff like this for online learning. And we're like, we're going to do it too. Why not? And so we jumped in and realized that our neighborhood has a lot of good home support. So other churches and other communities where there isn't a good home life, there isn't good home support, there isn't good home technology access, all of those things, their LECs are thriving. But we have families who are like, yeah, we don't really need any help. I think we'll be able to manage it on our own. And so it's really easy to know when something like that has failed, because when you measure it, nobody shows up. So, so obviously it didn't meet a need in our community. And so it wasn't relevant. And so we joked and we said, what would have been a more relevant tactic for us to fulfill this vision to reach our community would have been to start a program called Academic Excellence or something like that, and charge $50 a week per student. And I think that would have met a need in our community, which is a suburb of Columbus. It's a little more affluent, high Asian population that definitely has a very high value on academics and academic excellence. I think we could have met a greater need to say to parents, hey, this isn't just to support you because maybe things aren't, there isn't enough home support, but we're going to help your kids thrive and be successful in the midst of all of this. So if we would have pivoted, we probably, it would have been a more relevant expression of our vision than just adopting somebody else's vision and trying to plop it into your neck of the woods and the people that God's called you to.
Wow. And you're not the only leader to do that, is to try to take something that's working somewhere else and just try to like infiltrate it in. But we do this all the time. I mean, as leaders, and I think that's always some of the, that's working over there. Sweet. Let's go. Right. And I'm not exactly saying that you're trying to look for the magic bullet, but at the same, and I know that's not what you're doing, but we do that. And because we just see it working there. I think I have the position here. Let's do it again. And just a different thing. And you're just realizing the uniqueness, as you've said, of that particular endeavor. But man, I've done that as well. Absolutely. I thought, and it was a total crash and burn. House churches. So for me, and church planting was house church movement. It's humming. I read every book. I've talked to all the gurus. I've gone to the trainings. I'm going to plant house churches. And we tried to plant house churches in a suburban, Anglo context. And it just did not go. And the reason why is because the the culture of that particular area was very mainline. Sunday morning, 10 a.m., building, right? Mortgage, like all of that was very normative. Like, so bring your kids, they go to children's ministry. I listen to the pastor, I get to participate on the Sunday morning in those ways. So we were doing something that was like so foreign.
Right.
But we saw it blowing up overseas. We saw it blowing up in the city. And we're like, well, hey, we're kind of close to the city. And we just misread. But I mean, we misread the entire DNA, and it was a slug the whole time. So it's just, you do it, and it wasn't relevant. It wasn't relevant to the needs of the people. No, the gospel was relevant because we were seeing people come to Christ and right, all those other pieces. But you're like, why weren't they people gathering? Well, because we didn't have a Sunday morning to gather too. And that was just it baked into the DNA. All right, take us into the last one, which I think is super easy to kind of think through, but it also is really challenging. So take us in to the fifth point about vision.
Yeah. So the last part about having a vision that's functional and is directional and will get you towards what God wants is that it's known. And so if the vision that God has given you is just something that you are letting rattle around in your head, it will never be accomplished because you are not Jesus. And God has built the church to rely on one another, right? We're all members of the same body. I need other parts of the body. Ephesians 4 says it's God's gift of grace to the church, that there's different types of leadership, offices and roles and influence, apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher. All of those things are necessary in order for the accomplishment of what God wants. You can't do it on your own. You're always going to have a twisted bias that, if left unchecked, will lean you in a wonky direction that won't be the whole fulfillment of what God is leading you into. If it's just a personal vision, just for you, fine, live it out for yourself. But if it's a corporate vision, if it's for your church, if it's for your ministry, it must be known so that other people can say, I want a part of that. I want to step into that. I want to take a piece of that. I think I could influence and lead that. Or you could say, I need you because I'm not naturally wired that way. God hasn't gifted me that way. I don't see things that way. I only see it from my perspective. And to get a full perspective on this, I need more people sitting around the table with different positions. So your vision must be known because you need help and you need other people to step in and say, I'm with you. Let's move in this direction together.
Yeah. And so helping it be known, it goes back to all the previous four. It's got to be specific enough. It's got to be measurable enough. It's got to be inspirational enough to grab our attention. It's got to be relevant to those that we're trying to reach in this particular season. And then my perspective is you're going to bang your head over and over and over again, getting people to not only to be able to articulate it back to you, but for them to become completely invested in it and to say, well, no, like we're championing every man, woman, and child doing it in this particular way, or qualitatively, quantitatively, we're doing this many, in order for people to go, I know where I fit in the midst of all of that. Right. And so they can champion that outside of you and I as leaders, right. Or, the pastor of the church. So it's a real struggle, but how do you pound that drum over and over and over again and not give up or get bored, to be honest? Like, how do you do that as a leader?
Yeah. So I think the way that vision is known, well, first of all, the importance of making sure your vision is known is because we've all been in those environments, meetings, worship services, churches, leadership teams, whatever the case may be. And you don't know what the purpose is, right? Yep. You don't know, like, where are we trying to get to? And so being able to have the end in mind, being able to have a clear picture of where you're going, helps, and for everybody to know that, for you to articulate, listen, we're doing this right now because it's going to get us closer to looking like the vision that God has given us. And so we've got to do this right now. That's why we're in this meeting. That's why we've created the service this way. That's why our ministry teams are organized the way they are. That's why our budget is organized, because we think it's going to get us to the vision that God has given us. And so to make sure it's known helps your team go, oh, okay, well, what can I do in order to help move? Or now I'm fully on board in order to participate in this way. And so instead of people going, man, I don't know about you, I've been in tons of those settings where you're just like, I don't get it. I don't understand why we're doing this. And so to be able to allow the vision to be known, to invite people to be a part and say, hey, because you're doing this right now, it's moving us closer to that goal, to that picture of what God has been doing in our lives. So that's good. So when it comes to vision and pounding the table, as you said, I think it's always better to live it out yourself. So first, you've got to live it out yourself and embrace the values and intentions that are going to get you there, and begin to install that into a few other people. So the reason that vision leaks faster in some organizations than others is because leaders think that the best way to install vision is by broadcasting it widely. And I don't think that's the best way to install vision. I think the best way to spread vision is to invest in a few people who then understand it and are living it out, and then can bring leadership and influence into those things. So you're going to bang your head against the wall if you think that just broadcasting it from your widest platform is the best way to install vision in your people. It's not. It's the other way, that you embrace it fully and live it out, and then you help other people to participate in that and allow them to spread it as you're spreading it.
What I'm hearing you say, and something that I'm taking away from this conversation today, is instead of broadcasting it widely, is to invest it deeply. Right. And so it may look like a nucleus. Let's go back to our Bibles for a minute and just remember how Jesus did this with an inner circle of 3 investing deeply, and then a group of 12. And those men and others were able to gather quickly those and spread it widely. But that's 3-ish years of Jesus deeply investing and giving the DNA of that vision to reach every man, woman, and child with good news, right? That's interesting to think about, that deepness rather than the spread, because you and I both love the spread, right? I mean, we're just like, come on, wildfire, let's go, but eventually it's going to burn out if it's just this broadcast widely instead of getting some depth. I like that, Josh.
That's good.
So, so I guess what SMIRK is the acronym now. Yeah, so give it a little bit of a knowing smirk here. With it being,
God reveals the picture of the future, when he gets what he wants, when the expression of God's heart in the area of the people that God has called you to reach, you can just sit back with a smirk and know that this is where you're going. So SMIRK is the acronym. It stands for specific, measurable, inspirational, relevant, and known.
I like it. Josh, this has been a good season of Lead Live, 20-ish episodes, 19, 20 episodes. I can't remember. Season 1 is available on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Periscope, in the App Store, or in the podcast store, whatever that's called, Apple Podcasts. And then this one, obviously available all on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, and we're kind of dressing the rest of the seasons to be laid out. Josh and I are going to be taking a break, viewers, because essentially we've been doing Lead Lives almost nonstop every week since the pandemic hit. So we're going to take a little bit of time to kind of recover, get season 3 laid out and planned for you all. We're really excited to have more leaders into Lead Live. This is so helpful for Josh and I, as well as our leaders, to have these kinds of conversations. So, yeah, go ahead, Josh.
So,
what do you want to say?
And I'll say this is the culmination and the follow-up. Sorry about my dog who's greeting neighbors.
Pandemic.
This is a follow-up, or this is the culmination of a training that we're getting ready to release called Church Multiplication Training. We believe that every church and every leader should be multiplying themselves, their ministries. Churches should be multiplying. And so we hope that this resource is super helpful. So if you don't already like and follow Lead on Facebook, please do, so that you can be notified when that training is released here in the next couple of days. So
yeah.
Make sure that you're following us so that you can stay informed when that drops here shortly.
Absolutely. We'll post everywhere we have on social, as well as our website, and you can join us there. We'll probably have a sign up to be notified about church multiplication training. Just go to leadcma.org for that. Also, if you're watching or catching it on the recap, registration is still open because of COVID. We're going to allow our registration to be open a whole lot longer than we've publicized, but that's just because people are still trying to discern what God is saying, as well as the uncertainty of COVID numbers rising here and there. And so we're just trying to leave that door open for God to work in your life. Josh, we've got a great launch list right all over the country. It's so amazing to see what Jesus is doing in the lives of our leaders. I was on the phone today with another leader getting ready to jump into one of our Ohio cohorts. So we're really grateful. You can go to leadcma.org/apply, and then you can choose the January launch, or the July launch is available as well. You can select either of those and work through our application process. If you have any questions, you can always click. We have a chat bot on the site, and it'll connect you to a live person. We try to respond within moments of you connecting with us on the site. So if you have any questions, go ahead and go to leadcma.org and then click on the message tag, and we'll chat with you there. Josh, as always, it's great to be with you in these episodes, and looking forward to season 3 coming in 2021. We'll leave it a little bit open-ended, but we'll get to it eventually. All right.
Awesome.
As always, Josh, great to be with you. Go ahead and take us out.
It's been a joy. Leaders, don't forget to register for the Lead program if you haven't already. Join with tons of other men and women who are choosing to invest in their leadership. God wants to do something amazing through you. And so we want to help you do that. So until next time, though, leaders, lead on. Have a great one.